Cody, again, welcome everyone. Appreciate your time joining us this evening. Tonight's special guest and guest speaker doesn't need much of an introduction, but I'm gonna give him one as best as I can. He started refereeing in 1984. This is according to Wikipedia, so sorry, home, if I get a little bit of these cut wrong. Started refereeing in 1984. He made his international debut in 1997. 2 years later, was selected to attend his first of his three World Cups, attending World Cups in 99, 2003, and then wrapping up in 2007 World Cup. During that 2007 World Cup, he became the most capped Test referee at the time. And then in that third and fourth playoff that you refereed there, becoming, as I said, the most capped Test referee in 2007. And then I understand signing off in about 2008 as New Zealand's second highest first-class referee with 220 appointments. So that's not a bad shift. So welcome, Paul. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. How are you?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, not too bad. Thanks, Mike. And I can appreciate that the numbers are slightly down because Bryce Lawrence was on this webinar about 2 weeks ago. So he's probably taken all the good viewers away and stolen a fair bit of anyone else's thunder because he would have been a big highlight early on in the webinar series. But it's great to be here. I mean, we are currently in some very extraordinary times, and it's a great opportunity for us to stay connected, to hopefully open a forum where we can find out if people are struggling to cope with what we're dealing with at the current point in time. We're just about to head into week 6 of a fairly unusual, what we call normal. So it's great to be here and to be a part of tonight's webinar. And yeah, just to clarify on one point, my actual first year of refereeing was in 1983 when I was 20 years of age. Sorry, mate. And my first year was in Waikato, to be true.
You started in the best spot.
Well, I did.
Sorry,
I did.
I'll have to jump onto Wikipedia and edit that page and get it up to date for you. Apologies. Just quickly, just to start us off, how was life in the Honiss bubble? Is everything going well for the last 6 weeks? And what have you sort of been doing to keep yourself busy during this time?
Well, yeah, life is pretty good in the bubble. It's just my wife and I here at Mount Maunganui. And we're still talking to one another and still sleeping in the same bedroom. So I suppose that's probably a positive from my perspective, that I haven't thrown my toys out of the cot. But really, to be honest, we've been very busy. I see Bryce is on tonight. As a referee management team, we basically haven't stopped. We have been working out of the office at New Zealand Rugby House, and we're basically carrying on with what we've been doing at home on the Zoom conference calls. Nothing unusual for us to be on 5 or 6 conference calls a day. We're talking about how the business can reinvent itself as a result of COVID-19. And those are very challenging times for us, not only as a team, but also as an organisation. And we are putting training modules together. We're having regular catch-ups with our national squad, even though we had to go through the difficult decision of having to disband our national squad and their respective coaches. We still want to remain connected to them, keep talking to them about how that they can improve themselves and prepare for life after COVID-19 when we want rugby to get back together again and obviously be playing.
Yeah, cool. So kicking off, can you just take us to a bit of the early stages of your refereeing? You mentioned that you started in 1983 refereeing in the Waikato. What got you into refereeing rugby to start with?
Okay, I'll try and keep it as brief as possible because I'd love to be able to answer as many questions that come in. And I see Cody's trying to prompt some people to ask some questions. So, like any normal kid in my era, I was born in the 60s. We always wanted to grow up and be an All Black. And I played from 5 years of age, got through to secondary school in Hamilton. I broke a leg in 1 year, and the following year I got badly concussed and ended up in hospital. And the advice from the medical people in hospital was to give the game away because back in those days, headgear wasn't popular. In fact, it doesn't actually make much of a difference to you anyway. And so I made the conscious decision when I left Hamilton to go to university in Christchurch, I'd give the game away for 12 months and quickly realised I desperately missed it in my life. And so decided to make the decision that, well, as a player, as a kid growing up, I wanted to be an All Black. Well, if I couldn't do it as a player, then ultimately my goal was that I could try and do it in a black jersey blowing the whistle. Because back in those days, obviously we refereed in our country of origin colours. And that was the goal, to ultimately referee on the international stage. So, yeah, started up at 20 years of age, which back then was pretty young. Progressed through to 1991 when I had my first national appointment in Levin. It was a New Zealand under-19 team, played a Horowhenua Kapiti development side. And from there, elevated myself to a professional contract in the second year of Super Rugby in 1997. And I suppose the rest is history. In 2008, I retired after 3 World Cups and took a break from the game. I actually moved into working for, I wanted to focus on getting my career back on track, my own personal career. So I had a job with Downer for 3.5 years. They were the current sponsors of New Zealand referees. So one of the main roles I had there was actually looking after that sponsorship property and creating events around the sponsorship of our referees. And I'd invite the likes of Bryce and Glenn Jackson and Nick Bryant and those guys to aftermatch functions with our executive at Downer, and we'd have some of our key clients and guests there. So I stayed involved in the game. And then after a period of about 3 or 4 years, I had got my career back on track and decided it was time that I still had a void in my life in rugby and wanted to give something back to refereeing, and that was in the coaching space. And here we are today. So that's pretty much a short synopsis of how things panned out.
Yeah, cool. We've got a question here from Andrew. No, mate, you're still there. We've got a question here from Andrew, and he said, how do you think rugby refereeing changed from that amateur to professional rugby? So you'd probably be perfect in that, wouldn't you? You would have refereed towards the tail end of that amateur stuff and then got right into that pro stuff right at the good timing.
Yeah, yes, indeed. In fact, I was part of the group that sort of initiated the communication gear from back in those days. We were known as touch judges, but the ARs, and that was talking devices through the touch judge flags. And I was initially against it because I realised that I'd have an earpiece in my ear, and I'd be getting information from a second or third source, and I just saw it as a distraction, which is something we talk about today in terms of our refereeing performances. We try and minimise distractions for referees when they're preparing for their games. So I was against that initially, and then of course the game evolved and we went into far more comprehensive communication gear. And then, as you know, today we've got television match officials, which were in vogue when my career was finishing, and we now have big screens at the games. So the game has changed significantly. The mistakes that I was making in the early parts of my international career, if I was refereeing today, I probably wouldn't have made those today. But that's just the way the game has evolved. And I think it's a great thing. And it's come about because we are now in a professional era, and there are huge stakes on the table every time a team goes out to play. We know that if a team wins a competition like the Super Rugby competition, there are bonuses for players. So it's just the natural evolution of being in a professional era. And I think the game is in pretty good stead at the moment. And we've hopefully got the balance right between technology and the referee being able to referee in his environment or his or her environment with confidence, with input from ARs and the necessary interactions with television match officials to make sure we get the big decisions right and the game isn't being impacted by some decisions that we are actually eventually getting wrong.
Nice, cool. Going back, if we can try to just, before we get into the bit of the coaching stuff, which is, I know what your current role is at the moment in New Zealand Rugby, can we just touch base on a couple of those most memorable moments that you had as a referee? Is there anything that really stands out for you through that career? I
always find this a difficult question to answer because over an international refereeing career of about 11 years, there were quite significant ones. I remember one in particular was I was down to a referee Ireland versus England in Six Nations in 2001, and some of you who are of my vintage will probably remember there was a foot and mouth outbreak in Ireland, and they decided to cancel all their Six Nations Test matches, and as it turned out, it was the last Six Nations Test match of the tournament. And England at that stage were unbeaten, and I was due to referee that game in March, and it was postponed, and I had to go up to the UK in August, September. So that was just a one-off test match, and Ireland ended up winning that day at Lansdowne Road in Ireland. And the most memorable part of that particular occasion was obviously afterwards you go into Dublin, and in those days we used to wear our All Blacks blazer, well, our referee blazer with the silver fern, a black blazer with a silver fern. And I walked into this particular bar. It was down in the basement, and all they did was they sold champagne in this place. And a good refereeing colleague of mine, Alan Lewis from Ireland, took me into this place, and we walked in, and everyone saw the New Zealand referee blazer and realised that I was the referee of the match, and I didn't have to buy a drink for the whole night, so that was quite good. It saved me quite a few pounds. But there was that game. There was the opening game of 2003 Rugby World Cup between Australia and Argentina. That was a highlight. And obviously my last game in a Rugby World Cup venue was the 2007 bronze final between Argentina again and France. So those are probably three games that stick out in my mind. But I was also privileged enough to judged or AR the 2003 World Cup final and the 2007 World Cup final. So there are quite a few highlights for me, but those are probably the three that stick out.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for that. And if we sort of flip that on the head, some of the bigger learnings for you and throughout that career as well, what were some of those? And then hopefully that will take us segue us into Simon's question there around some tips with our referee and referee coach relationships as well. So
yeah, for sure.
You took?
Look, I've like any referee, we've got quite a few that we could share, but the one I do want to share the most is probably my experience at the 2007 Rugby World Cup. I went there knowing that potentially it was going to be my last World Cup. I mean, I knew that in 2011 we had one in New Zealand, but I went there and I'd set myself some goals of trying to referee well. But I think what I did in the moment of setting some goals for that tournament was that I basically set an outcome goal, which was that I wanted to be involved in knockout stages. And so my very first game that tournament was South Africa versus Samoa. And whilst I made some decisions that day that I don't regret, I was pretty much vilified in the media for my performance that day. And part of the problem there was that, and I remember it quite vividly when I sat back and reflected on it. And this is one of the key things we've got to know as referees, is that the experience of refereeing is not the value, it's the learnings you take from an experience as a referee. And I sat back after that game and reflected that I went out onto that field for 80 minutes and I was trying to be someone that I wasn't authentically refereeing as. I wanted to go out there and try not to be the person that I normally was. I wanted to be someone different. And part of the reason that in my reflection I was really disappointed with myself was because I had Bryce Lawrence as my TMO that day and I had Lyndon Bray as one of my ARs. And I was disappointed that I let those guys down because I was virtually vilified in the media, and it was a pretty bitter pill to swallow. But it actually made me sit down in my room, in my hotel room in France, and think, geez, mate, what have you done wrong here? You know, you need to sit back and ask yourself, what the hell was different today versus what you've done in the past? And that's when I sat down and decided for the rest of the tournament, I'm just going to take one game at a time, and I'm going to prepare myself as best I possibly can, so that I'm in the best possible mental space I can be in when I cross the line, when I go out the tunnel and walk onto the field. And the next two games that I did, one was Portugal versus Romania. And as you can understand, the standard of rugby wasn't great. The final score ended up being 14-12, and it was an absolute dogfight. But I came off that field thinking, well, I was myself tonight, and I did all the best I could. So I basically said to myself, well, if that's not good enough, then tough luck. And then my next game, which ended up being an absolute ripper, was Argentina versus Ireland. Ireland had to win to make the quarterfinals, and Argentina wanted to win to finish top of their pool. And I remember the first half, I had Craig Joubert and I had Mark Lawrence on touch for me. And I came off at halftime, and it was like the first half had lasted about 10 minutes. I was just so in the zone and had prepared so well for that. And the second half was just as fast in terms of time span. And I remember coming off that thinking, well, I've done all I can as a person and as a referee, and I've been true to myself. And ultimately, thankfully, I got the bronze final to do on the Friday night. And then on the Saturday night, I was able to AR the World Cup final. So I probably turned my tournament around, where I'm pretty sure the selectors were thinking after game one, this guy's going to have a shit tournament. Excuse my French, ladies, if you're on the call. But this guy hasn't started very well, and he's basically got to move mountains in order to get back into the reckoning in terms of a selection for us in the knockout stages. So that was a big learning for me, and that's something I talk to the current professional crop is, look, you can emulate, you can take bits and pieces out of a Wayne Barnes, or a Nigel Owens. You can take bits and pieces from them, but when you walk across the white line for your 80 minutes, you've got to be true to yourself, and you've got to be authentically you. Yes, there will be elements you want to take from refereeing performances that you've learned over the years or over the months, but ultimately you've got to deliver those learnings yourself in your own way, and do it in such a way that you're confident in yourself and you're confident in the way you're delivering it to the players, so they have confidence in you. So that would be my biggest learning, and believe it or not, that was in my last year of professional refereeing. So it just goes to show you that the learning curve never stops. And if you think it does, that's probably the time you've got to pack your boots up and give it up. Hopefully that didn't go on too long.
Oh, okay, now I'm back. Sorry, I was muted there for a bit. I couldn't unmute myself. Cool, thank you for that, Homer. So if we sort of tie that into your current role now then within the referee coaching space, looking back on those sort of experiences as a referee, how would you now sort of coach yourself or mentor yourself as a referee coach for a scenario like that? Does that make sense?
No, it does. It makes perfect sense, and it just reinforces the importance of having an honest and open relationship with your coach, so that you can have the tough conversations. And the really important thing that a coach can do is actually ask you the right questions, so that you actually come to the answers yourself. It's not a situation of the coach coming to you with all the answers for what problems you've got. The greatest thing a coach can do for you as a person and as a referee is ask you the right questions, so that you actually challenge yourself to come up with the answers as to why things happened the way they did. And I mean, I sort of stumbled on that myself. Like, I didn't have my coach with me in France. He was back here in New Zealand. And so I sort of took that coaching role under my own wing myself. And my own self-reflections were sort of asking the questions of me: why did things happen and transpire the way they did? And why was pressure put on my TMO that day? I remember Bryce Lawrence was sweating over a couple of decisions he had to make. I know that Lyndon Bray sweated over a couple of flaggings he made that day. So that was really what I suppose I was doing myself. And today we're trying to emulate that in the way we use the GROW model, in that we are wanting referees and coaches to set goals that are specific to the referees, and they will be specific to those individuals. But that part of that relationship and the conversations that you have post-match is that we are actually growing your understanding of why things have happened, and what you could do differently to ensure that those things don't occur again, and create some learnings around why you did things a certain way and why it's better to do them a different way going forward. Yeah, so cool. I hope I've answered that question as articulately as I can.
Yeah, definitely. And it kind of, I've just seen Cody's comment as well around you were a referee full of personality and very much your own brand. Do you think our referees today, referees in today's game, the same license? Do we allow our referees in today's game the same license? Do we?
Well, yeah,
the GROW model sort of push everyone into a bit of a not a pigeonhole, but tailors people to be a certain type of referee?
No, it certainly doesn't, and it shouldn't. And if it does, then I'd suggest to you that possibly the coach-referee relationship is breaking down. We would encourage our coaches for our referees to be as natural as they possibly can. We have referees in our professional group, and I'm not going to mention any names, but I'll give you some insight into some of the things that we work on with them. Some of our referees communicate more than others, and we are encouraging them to make their communication as effective as possible. Now, some have tried to alter their communication, and they feel uncomfortable doing that. So my message to them is, do what makes you feel most comfortable, but do it in such a way that you are as effective as you possibly can as a referee. Now, that might mean you do communicate a little bit more than others, but ultimately you're happy doing what you're doing and you're actually getting some pretty good outcomes in your 80 minutes of rugby. Sure, we'll have some conversations about how some communication might have broken down during an 80-minute performance, but ultimately we want them to be as natural as they possibly can. And like I said earlier, you can take little pieces out of a Wayne Barnes performance or a Nigel Owens or a Ben O'Keefe or a Mike Fraser, but you have to deliver them in your own special way. It's not a case of you saying, I'm going to take a bit of Nigel Owens and throw a little bit of humour in there, because that can backfire on you and can actually work in the opposite to what you're trying to achieve. So we certainly would not try and pigeonhole our referees. That's certainly not what our Grow model is about. It's about being as natural and as confident in your own skin as you possibly can be. And probably one of the key things we try and instill in our referees is that we want you to look comfortable when you are feeling most uncomfortable. And that's one of the key things we try and get into our referees at an early stage. Is in the big moments, you've got to look comfortable as if you're enjoying the occasion. And although deep down and in your stomach, you're thinking, this is an oh shit moment, you just got to make it look so good that when you deliver it, everyone buys into it, even the players, and you move on. And that's really the art of refereeing at the highest level.
Yeah, 100%. I think that authenticity thing is a massive part of refereeing, and then even more so the higher up you get. I think Rick's just sort of made a comment there that alludes to that in terms of, for those that have a bit of a funny bone, how much humour is allowed on the paddock nowadays in the professional era. And you sort of touched on it before, but it's about having that relationship with your coach, who can then sort of say, mate, that's not you trying to be funny, or that was good, you know. So how much do you think you see today in terms of these guys trying to be a little bit too much Nigel Owens-y when it's not really them?
Yeah, and it can backfire, unfortunately. Look, Nigel's perfected the skill. I take my hat off to him. I certainly couldn't do what he does, or did, sorry, when I was refereeing. I couldn't do what he did. I used to, every now and then, try and bring some humour into it, and the players would look at you as if you had two heads. And so you quickly learned that probably wasn't the right path to try and head down. And look, let's just referee the game, because this is a white-hot environment. And they don't want to hear any funny one-liners. But Nigel just perfected the art and did it extremely well. And as you can see today, there aren't too many referees who try and emulate what he did. If we were to look at one of the things, I'll share a story with you. One of our professional referees this year refereed a test match, and these are the sort of conversations we have to have in reflection. So I'll just sort of move into the reflection part of a coach-referee relationship. So in the professional environment, I try and put as much accountability and ownership on the referee to come back to me with their understanding of what they believe they've done well and what they believe they could work on. So in the professional environment, particularly in a test match environment, there's normally meetings post-test match. In this particular occasion, it was a Six Nations test, and they have a mini camp on a Monday or the Tuesday following the test matches. And so the referees are basically in a position where they've almost got to do a summary of how they believe their test went, which is a great thing for them to have to do in front of their colleagues. But one of the key tasks that I do is I flick through a pretty short dossier of the key moments in the game. And in this particular situation, there were some key moments, but there were also some housekeeping moments that I felt he really let himself down on. And so I fired a question across saying, here are 3 timings. Have a look at these kickoffs and tell me whether this is the standard you want to set at international level. And he came back to me almost instantly, having had a quick look at the 3 clips, going, you're dead right. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I've really let myself down in this particular standard of the game. And so this is the self-awareness we want to create within the referees. Now, he hadn't had a chance to review, but what I was doing was I highlighted some key moments in the game, but I also highlighted a couple of other things that he needed to stand up in front of his peers and say, I didn't deliver to the standard that we expect at international level, and for that I apologise. So these are the sort of learnings we want our professional referees and the skill set in terms of their review. We want them to elevate themselves to and be brutally honest. And really, my role really is asking the why questions. Why did something like that happen in a test match arena when really you would do that on your ear if you were refereeing Mitre 10 Cup or even a Super Rugby competition? So we have to ask and delve a little bit deeper as to why something like that happens on an international stage. So it's important that they are reflecting really robustly and being completely honest with themselves before we have those conversations.
Yeah, nice. So for those referee coaches that we've got joining us this evening, what would be your your key message to them around the GROW model? We know it's still relatively new. Some provinces in the country are using it very well, others don't use it at all, and then there's obviously everything else in between. So what would sort of be your key message to those referee coaches that we've got around getting stuck in and really embracing that GROW model for 2020, fingers crossed, or moving forward into 2021?
Oh, look, that's a great question, Mike. And look, to all the coaches on the call tonight, all I can say to you is that in my day, when I was refereeing, and I hate using that phrase, but when I was refereeing, I was in the era of the assessor, and so I was being judged, reviewed, evaluated, whatever you want to call it. And as soon as I walked over the white chalk to start a game of rugby, I was starting on 80%, and every time I made a mistake, bang, 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 the score went down. And some days you might get a report that said you're only 65% perfect today, and other days you might get 85% perfect, but you were never 100%. And we all understand that. But that's in the old days. The GROW model now is all about building relationships with referees, and not telling them what they're doing wrong, but it's actually having conversations where you're motivating them to learn from their experiences. You're having conversations where you're actually questioning and digging a little bit deeper so that they think themselves deeper about what the issue is. And you are creating a conversation which enhances their ability to answer the question themselves, rather than coming to you as a coach going, what's my problem? So a common theme coming through that I've noticed in my time in this role is that some coaches are saying the GROW model only applies to premier referees. Well, I've got to stop the conversation right there and then and say, it doesn't matter what standard of referee you are, whether you're a first-year referee or whether you're an international referee, you are still always in the learning phase. So we as a coach have got to enhance that learn and grow mentality. So if I can use an example, a first-year referee might come to me, if he's in the Bay of Plenty region, I'm down at the ground watching a premier game. If a first-year referee come up to me and said, look, I'm a first-year referee, I wondered if you could come and watch me. I've really got no confidence in blowing the whistle. And I might say to him, fantastic. What is it you actually want to learn? Why do you want to blow the whistle in a certain way? Oh, I've seen the guys on TV do it. And so one of the goals for that particular referee is he wants to learn how to blow the whistle properly. So he wants to know that he has to blow it reasonably firmly for a penalty offence and not quite so firmly for a scrum offence or what we call a minor offence. So that referee has a goal, and that's as simple as it can be. It could be, he could extend it and say that once I get my whistle tone correct, I want you to help me with my signals, because I really don't know how to signal my primary signal, which is obviously the offence. Is it a penalty or is it a scrum? And then I have real difficulty trying to get my secondary signal going. So was it for hands in the ruck? Was it for off the feet? Was it for offside? So there's another goal for what would be a first-year referee. And we also have those sort of issues with some of our professional referees. Some of their signals aren't great. So we have conversations around that. So here we are talking about a first-year referee, and here we are talking about a professional referee having a similar sort of issue. And the same can happen in terms of communication with players. So this GROW model encompasses everybody, and it's up to the coach to understand that, to understand what level each referee is in terms of their learning phase. So a first-year referee will obviously be in a very, very developmental stage versus someone who's been refereeing for 4 or 5 years, who understands a little bit about the game, is confident doing the basics, but then wants to go to another level and take his refereeing to another level of performance. So then we start incorporating standards into their goals. So instead of us saying you need to understand when a player goes off his feet, we're saying when you get to a higher level, the performance expectations increase. So it's not just about players being off their feet, it's about their entry and about their technique at the breakdown. So it requires us to be at the breakdown earlier than we were when we were in a developmental stage of our refereeing. So I have to really enforce this, that coaches, this GROW model applies to every single referee, whether you're first year or whether you're professional. I still have conversations today with my professional referees around communication, around positioning, around some signals, around the way they do things. And it's no different to a junior referee. It's just at a different level of learning. And if you're dealing with someone in a first year capacity, then you are a coach that has to be a lot more hands-on. And when I say hands-on, I'm meaning go down to a training with a young referee and teach him some of the basics of refereeing. And when I say that, it might just be going through the process of calling a scrum in. It's about making a mark. It's about making sure the players are the right distance apart. And you can encourage that referee as they grow through, get them down to live trainings and go through it in a live situation. So you're there to observe. And every time they put a live scrum down, you take a few minutes apart and say, how did that feel? How did you feel about how the scrums were set in terms of distance? What was the height like? How did you feel the height was going? And just ask those questions and get them to think about those things. And we still have those conversations as professional referees. Our boys are still talking about the timing between bind and set to make sure that we have stability before we call the set, so that we ensure that our height is right. And when we engage, both teams come together and their shoulders are above hips and we have stability before the ball goes in. So it's no different. And I have to encourage all coaches on this call tonight, tell anyone in your associations that are in this coaching framework that this GROW model applies to everybody and anybody. And it's all about building relationships with your athletes. And if you can do that and understand the learning levels of each of the individual athletes you work with, then the relationship can only prosper and the refereeing career can only prosper at the same time.
Yeah, nice, cool. I just had something come through privately around the GROW model. So maybe is it worth quickly just going through what that GROW acronym stands for, just in case there is a couple of people on here that aren't quite familiar with it, just real briefly, I reckon.
Great question. Okay, so the GROW is an acronym. The G stands for goals. So what that requires is for the referee to have a conversation with the coach, and we talk specifically probably in the community game around goals for an individual game. So we've talked about the blowing of a whistle, signalling. They can be two simple ones for an early referee, and you may have different ones for referees who've been in their careers for a period of time. And we had a conversation last night, and I'm sure you won't mind me sharing this, Michael, with some Waikato coaches last night around some referees just want to go down, referee the game, and have a beer afterwards. Well, what a great conversation for a coach to have. Okay, so what allows you to have fun in that 80 minutes? And yep, I appreciate you want to have a beer afterwards, but let's enjoy that beer together. And so that could be one of the goals, is have a chat with that referee about what makes your game fun. What do you have to do in order to have fun? And let's focus on one or two things around that. And then the third goal could be, let's have a beer together after the game and just have a nice casual chat about how you felt it went, and you can go home with a smile on your face. So that's what we talk about when we talk about goals. It's specific to the particular match, or when you get into the more high performance environment, we talk about goals over a longer period of time. But for the community game, we're talking about one game at a time. So we set our goals, and the referees go out there and referee, and the coach commits to coming along and watching the game on the basis of those goals that have been set. So that deals with the G part of grow. The R part is what we call reality. So you've finished your 80 minutes. Now we're into the place where we get into conversations. So the coach has observed the game, and the referee has obviously been out there in the middle, and his recollection of things may not be quite as clear as the coach's, but the coach's questions are all around the goals. And if we can use our man who wants to go down and have fun and then have a beer afterwards, his fun might have been that he just wants to have a tidy set piece at scrum time and be able to make his decisions with confidence and with clarity. In other words, blow his whistle well and make good signals. And that might be all he needs to do. And so they'll have a discussion around that. And the questions will be along those lines of the goal. So how did you feel today at scrum time? And the answer might be, well, I felt that the game started off really well after 20 minutes. And then we had a couple of replacements. And then things just seemed to go pear-shaped and went downhill from there. And so that would prompt the coach to go, okay, let's talk about that. What was the key moment? And the referee would go, well, it was around about the 20th minute. Yeah, and what happened in the 20th minute? Oh, I lost a couple of front rowers because they got injured. Right, okay. What happened then? Oh, I got two players off the sideline. They came on. And what happened at the first couple of scrums? Well, they weren't as good as the last guys. So what did you do to prepare for those guys coming on? Oh, I just carried on as normal. So the conversation continues on. So why did you continue on as normal? We had two new players on the ones. Did you change position? Did you say to them, this is what we require? Standards have been good so far. So the conversation carries on, and it's always normally with a why question, a why or a what. What did you do differently to prepare for those new players coming on the field? And what do you think contributed to the fact that your scrums went downhill from there? And what did you change as a result of those players? So you're actually asking the referee to come up with the answers themselves. So that's the reality piece. Now, in the conversation last night with the Waikato coaches, they said, look, sometimes there isn't great clarity after the game. And that's right. And that's why you don't have one conversation. You might have two, or you may end up having three if your referee is fortunate enough to have a video of the game and he or she's able to review them. So in this situation, say, for example, the referee was able to review some of his scrum clips and could pinpoint what his problem was or her problem was. So that's another opportunity for another conversation. So that's the reality piece. So then we talk about the O piece of grow, which is, okay, what options have we got to change what happened today so that we can prevent it from happening next week? What are our options? And so you've already had the discussion about the reality piece and you've highlighted. So the coach would paraphrase. Now, you mentioned earlier in the reality piece that these players came on after 20 minutes and you didn't do anything differently. What could you have done differently? So this is talking about the options. What could the referee have done? And you in the paraphrase, you say, look, you mentioned you didn't do anything. You mentioned you didn't swap sides. What could we do? So then the referee goes, oh, shucks. Yeah, maybe I should have gone to that side where those two players were propping against one another. And I should have reiterated what I said to the team at the very first scrum, that these were the standards we need. This is the space we need, and this is the height we need. And I'm going to be looking for stability between each call. So it just reinforces to the referee that these are the things that were missing in terms of the reality from the game that's just transpired. And so those are the options. You look at what are your options going forward to try and prevent what's happened in the past from occurring again. And so the W piece, the final piece in the grow model is, so what's the way forward? How can we prevent this from happening? And effectively, what are we going to do differently next? So what are our actions going to be going forward? And so that's how we bring the grow model together. It's a conversation piece that starts with the referee understanding what his or her goals are for that particular game or for a period of time. And the key part is and I hate to harp on about this, but the key part is that if the referee doesn't have a goal that he communicates with the coach has got no point in turning up to watch his or her match, and the coach effectively will revert back to being an assessor. He or she will go along to the game to watch, and he or she will say, well, you didn't give me a goal, so all I've got to do is give you feedback on how I thought you went, which is back to the mindset of an assessor, and we don't want that. We want conversations about enhancing a referee's ability to understand what he or she did wrong in their 80 minutes or 75 minutes or 70 minutes, whichever standard of rugby you're refereeing in.
Yeah, nice. So hopefully that helps out for our coaches. And I guess from a refereeing point of view, it's also important that as referees, we're not just saying, oh, my coach will sort that out, or my coach will give me a call on Wednesday to find out what my goals are because he knows he's coming to watch me or she knows. As referees, we've really got to commit to this as well and be vulnerable and be prepared to share some things that we might not have done in the past. But we also need to increase our communication, isn't it? And have that real good collaborative discussion and make it one team, one dream almost approach, isn't it? Between the referee as the athlete and then that coach as the mentor and the person to really help that referee strive and achieve those goals, eh?
Oh, without a doubt. Those communication channels have to be two-way, and if they aren't, then the relationship is breaking down, and something needs to be done to fix it. And it requires the referee to have the right attitude in terms of communication with the coach, and there should be terms of engagement. So on most occasions, I would think that coaches would be talking with their referees, having a conversation after the game, but also saying, look, on Monday night or Tuesday night, let's get together on a regular basis and talk about what transpired on the weekend and what we're looking forward to this weekend. As I say in the GROW model presentations, an assessor is all about facts and figures and right and wrong, whereas a coach is all about the personal, creating relationships, motivating, inspiring, having conversations that create confidence in the referee and the referee's ability to do the job.
Yeah, 100%. Which then sort of takes me in, that segues into that assessing sort of part, because you and I have spoken about this. There's definitely still that place for assessing, because the rankings sort of thing and a final and semi-finals appointments, which are important aspects to the refereeing season. So how would you suggest referee clubs or referee coaches that are assisting with their assessing, how do they sort of switch between those two hats of today I'm coaching versus Wednesday night I may have to do some sort of assessing with the wider referee group? Any thoughts around that?
Okay, I'm going to cut in. I think you've finished your question, because I want us to stop using the word assessing. I want that to be a terminology of the past, of my refereeing era, and I really mean that sincerely. And I'm not critical of you, Mike, but I think you're using the word in a selection criteria. So you're talking about selection, which is different to coaching. A coach has a role with the referee and a relationship with the referee, whereas selection is more about saying that you are wanting to appoint a particular referee for a particular appointment or a particular promotion, and that is a different conversation to a coaching conversation. So if we have coaches out there who are performing their roles, and then they have to put another hat on, as you mentioned, on a Wednesday night, and go into a selectorial meeting, well, those are completely different conversations that need to be had. And selection is more about the performance of the referee in the eyes of those selectors, and what they are specifically looking for a particular game, or as I said earlier, a particular promotion. So we would sincerely ask all coaches to move their mind away from the assessing terminology, talk about coaching in the present tense, and then in a selectoral conversation, you are having a conversation about who selectors believe, and that's why it's subjective. But we are working towards a model in selection where, and this comes back to the use of analysis and the accuracy of decision making, where selection is all about picking the right person for the right game, and in some cases that will upset people, but in the majority of cases we hope the selectors have got it right and are selecting the right referees for the right games, which is over and above the coaching space. So if I can get one message across tonight is that we leave that assessing terminology behind us.
Okay, yep, sounds good. I'm happy with that. We'll move into a selecting space rather than assessing space. That's
Cool.
That's good moving forward. And I think you've really defined the two different meanings as well. So hopefully people can sort of take that away, and if we can, like you said, start leaving assessing back in 2008, then that's going to definitely help us moving forward. We're just conscious of time, so if anyone's got any more questions they wanted to chuck through into the chat for Homer or myself to finish off with, we'll just wrap up. We'll finish off with the grow stuff, Homer.
Yep.
Obviously, we had all these workshops planned around the country for, I can't remember the specific date, but Jacinda sort of ruined those plans, so they were postponed due to lockdown. Do you just want to sort of give a bit of an insight into what the the referee management team are looking to achieve, either by having those workshops, if we can get them in a physical context, or what we're going to do over the next little month or two to have those have that learning available via Zoom?
Yeah. So what we're doing at the moment, and we're utilising our high quality referee educational officers around the country, of which you're one of them, Mike, and Cody's another. So I'm giving you guys a big plug. So with the advent of coronavirus, we're obviously, our best friend obviously at the moment is Zoom, and we're utilising the Zoom platform to be able to. We were looking at having a workshop on the 22nd of March, as Mike correctly alluded to. That's now been put on the back burner. It was a one-day workshop. We had guest speakers coming in from coaching environments where coaches were dealing with individual athletes, like a golf coach, a tennis coach, a squash coach, a triathlon coach, a cycling coach, those sort of people who were dealing with single athletes at a time, just so we can get an insight into what their world is like in a coaching environment. So what we've now done is we've split up the Grow model into four groups, and we'll be doing modules based on the goals, the reality piece, the options, what we've learnt from our reality discussions, and then what is the way forward. So they'll be occurring over the next 4 to 6 weeks. The initial module 1 that we're having is really, it's an opportunity for us to delve into your world and get a really honest understanding of what you believe the Grow model to stand for. And if you don't know what it stands for, that's great, because we want to know. We want to understand how much of a challenge it has been to accept the concept and the features and benefits of it. And we need to know in which areas we should probably focus a little bit more on our learnings and delivery in those areas that we believe are probably not understood as strongly as they could be. So we're rolling those models out with our referee educational officers, and they will then be having Zoom meetings with their coaches in their respective provincial unions. And at times when time permits, like for example, I was on one last night, I will sit in. Bryce is more than happy to sit in, as is Matt Peters and Emily Shea, who's our women's referee development manager. We're available to sit in on those meetings. And as I see someone's pointed out in one of the questions, yes, we'll actually do a little bit of a Grow review on how the referee educational officer handled the meeting. So we'll say to the referee education officer, okay, what were your goals for tonight? And let's talk about your reality. Did you actually extract out of your members what their understanding of the G, R, O, and W were? And if we had some members not understanding all of it, what were the key parts that weren't understood, so that we know that's something we've got to focus on in the future, so we get far better understanding. So we would do like a Grow model review of the presentation. And that's where we reinforce the value of this Grow model right across our refereeing family. And then it's not just focused on refereeing, it's focused on the development of our coaches and also our referee educational officers as well. and they should be reinforcing the key messages of why the GROW model is so important in the development of our people within our refereeing family, not just our referees.
Nice, cool. I just see a couple more questions that just quickly come through, so we'll tick these off and then we'll wrap it up, hopefully around that 8 o'clock mark for everyone. So Simon's just come through. Where would the best place to gain some information on coaching for us as coaches to learn and development other than the GROW workshops? My own personal thoughts would be regional sports trusts. So for example, here in Waikato, we've got Sport Waikato. They've all got coach development officers, Simon. So I would contact probably your regional sports trust, and they should definitely be able to help. Otherwise, your union. Home, have you got any thoughts? Probably those.
Well, look, we've got our own. Yeah, we've got our own coach development program within New Zealand Rugby. I mean, touch base with myself or Bryce or Matt. We can put you onto our game development people who'll be able to start that ball rolling as early as tomorrow. No problems at all. And I see Peter Revel's got a question there about being authentic, and is a huge work on public speaking. Look, public speaking is something that a lot of referees do struggle with. I know for a fact that some professional referees have done some work in this space, and that it is important to get that confidence so that when you are refereeing for 80 minutes and refereeing in the moment in a high impact situation, you do portray yourself confidently. Some of our professional referees have worked in the Toastmasters space in the past to develop that confidence and being able to speak on your feet and do it instantaneously, because as you know, we only get seconds to make decisions, and it's important that we do make those decisions as confidently as we can. So those are areas that you can do some work, and even put yourself forward in your local associations to do some presentations, and have a buddy at those particular meetings to give you feedback. I mean, your referee educational officer would be one person that would spring to mind who could give you some feedback on how you did a presentation, or anyone else for that matter who's in your association that you have some trust in and you've got a relationship with. So there are a number of ways we can assist in building that confidence and making you as authentic as you possibly can be.
Yeah, I think that just highlights it right then, isn't it? Just the fact about being authentic. If you're trying to think of something funny in that quick little moment, that's when you're going to stuff it up big time, and you're probably going to look worse off. So just stick with that authentic approach, and then I think you're going to be safe that way. And like you said, the REOs are always screaming out for people to help out with facilitating or presenting presentations. So there's a good opportunity to work on those sort of public speaking skills. And I don't know about you, Homer, but for me, my after-match speech is pretty much, I've got a couple sort of templates of how that goes. So I try not to waver too much from that. And again, it's just sort of, while being authentic, keeping it easy and trying not to be someone that I'm not by trying to be funny at an after-match speech. So maybe just practice a couple of different ideas around that as well, Peter. That could help as well. Yeah.
I mean, later on in my career, I was lucky enough to referee some club rugby back in the Waikato. I was fortunate enough that I had guys like Sumo, who played for Hautapu. I did a senior game out there one day, and he was the captain of the day, and I couldn't believe how they appointed him captain, but he was captain of the day, and he gave me a bit of jip, and I was fortunate that I had one joke up my sleeve, and I shamed him out much to the delight of the crowd. So later on in your career, you can get away with it, but it just brings that personal element out as well. And if you can speak confidently on your feet, it goes a long way to breaking down the barriers that inevitably do come to the fore when you mention that you're a rugby referee. They go, "Oh, one of you."
Yeah.
So.
No, sweet. Anthony's just also posted up here. He's got a lot of information on the virtual meeting page at the Auckland Rugby Referees Association. So chuck that into Google and have a look at their virtual referee page. Anthony and Cody have done a great job during this lockdown time to get plenty of stuff up on there. So if you're still looking for a couple of places to have a look and find some rugby content, check that out. And hopefully that will keep you busy tomorrow.
Yeah, and if I can just finish by saying, look, thanks everyone for coming on tonight. I know these are really tough times. And if I can just say something on behalf of New Zealand Rugby, it's that please stay safe. please remember that our great game is going through a very, very tough time at the moment. And then unless we get to level 2, we potentially won't see any professional rugby in New Zealand. So we need to get to level 2. We need to get the message out there that we need to go forward and get ourselves into level 1. We can't go backwards, because that will mean that our game cannot continue to be played here in the country. And we desperately need that for our organisation and for the well-being of our game. So please be vigilant. Don't go out and be silly. Stay safe. Do everything you can to not expose yourself to any dangers out there in relation to the COVID-19. And one of my goals tonight was to try and keep you as interactive as possible in questions and answers. And I hope in terms of reality, I've achieved that. And if I haven't, just flick me a text and tell me I was a knob. And I'll work on that for the next time as part of my options and my way forward. Over.
Thanks, Homer. Good way to sign off. Right. As Homer quickly alluded to, thanks again everyone for tuning in Wednesday night with our guest speakers. Really appreciate it, Cody. Thanks very much for setting it all up. And just wanted to reiterate what Homer's touched on. Everyone just stay safe, stay well in our little bubbles. And fingers crossed for level 2 rugby, or level 2, so we can get some professional rugby, and then even better level 1 rugby, or level 1 alert, so we can get some community rugby. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you next Wednesday night. And stay safe, stay well. Thanks.
Take care, folks. Cheers. Bye-bye. Cheers.